Hi, this is Wonton and welcome to the second part of my LFR to Flex guide. This video will cover Flex 3 and Flex 4. The boss fights in this part of Siege of Orgrimmar become increasingly complicated and there's no way to ignore mechanics anymore, so buckle up. Malkorok. This fight is a raid coordination check. This is probably the first boss that's impossible if there's 2 or 3 people just hoping to get carried in your group, as one person's mistake here can easily wipe the raid. Start by spreading healers and ranged DPS around evenly, and make sure everyone remembers their position. Have someone assigned to mark arcing smashes so everyone knows the safe zones for the breath. Tanks. Nothing new here, but you can help the melee a bit by moving the boss to a safe zone after the 3rd arcing smash. Healers. This is a rough healer fight, but if you manage that on LFR, you can probably manage it on Flex. The default raid frames keep track of the 3 different levels of Ancient Barrier, but if you're using an add-on like Grid, you might need to configure it manually to show that. Don't forget to use big healing and raid cooldowns during the Blood Rage phase. DPS. Ranged, know your assigned position and make sure to return to it after each Breath or Blood Rage phase. Melee, make sure one of you soaks the melee puddle. Remember, getting an extra spell out has the potential to deal 100k damage, but a clutch blink to soak an empty puddle has the potential to make you a hero who saved the raid from wiping. Spoils. Tanks. There are now 2 green panda crates in each quadrant that give you raid buffs when they die. Open them first and make sure someone clicks on the orbs they drop, as their buffs are really quite powerful. The enrage timer is much tighter on Flex, so since all the mobs on this fight hit like kittens, you have to open fast and chain pull. Keep track of the progress of the fight. Remember, huge crates give you 13 energy, mediums give 3, and smalls give 1. The basic strategy is to have either a huge or medium open at all times, and 1 or 2 smalls to cleave with it. Personally, I like to start with a huge, and then do mediums and smalls until about 35, and then do the other huge box with a few smalls to finish off. DPS and healers. First, watch for the abilities of the 2 new pandas at the start of each room, as, surprisingly, they're one of the most deadly opponents on this fight. Particularly, don't get hit by the Brewmaster's spinning fire breath, and don't be grouped with the Windwalker's charge, since it stuns everyone in a small AoE. Otherwise, continue dumping set to blow bombs away from the raid, and make sure to jump into the red circles for Matter Scrambler. Thok. Although this is supposed to be a coordination fight, on Flex it's possible to do the entirety of it in the first phase if you have 3 to 4 solid healers. This is of course beneficial, as later phases are all more dangerous than the initial starting phase. Tanks. Perform clean swaps at 2 to 3 stacks, and stay away from the dinosaur during Blood Frenzy. Healers. Heal as hard as you possibly can during the first regular phase, as it has no definite ending and it's possible to drag it on for a very long time if you can manage to keep everyone above 50% between casts of Deafening Screech. Ask your paladins for devotion auras or hands of protection if you want to get some big heals in without being silenced. The acid phase is annoying and should hopefully end quickly, but try and dispel as much as possible to reduce damage here. The ice phase should also be prolonged as much as possible, as it's much easier to handle than the final fire phase, so once again, heal as hard as you can. DPS and healers. If you get fixated during Blood Frenzy, alternate running Thok up and down the hall. Melee, stay away from him entirely during this phase, as touching him even a little will one-shot you. Ranged DPS can stay on the boss, but it's your own responsibility to stay alive. Keep him at max range at all times if you don't want to get eaten. Siege Grafter. Tanks. Your primary objective here is to kill the Shredder before the next one comes out and you need to swap. Position it in fire and saw blades and use offensive cooldowns, talents, and glyphs. Black Fuseum's health hurts quite a lot, so be smart about your defensive cooldown usage. Healers. Nothing new here. This is one of those fights where healing is only hard when people are standing and stuff. DPS. The belt now puts a debuff on you called Pattern Recognition that prevents you from going up twice in a row, meaning there will now be 2 belt groups that alternate. On the belt, prioritize crawler mines, or the missile turret if no mines spawn. On the main platform, any DPS targeted by fire or saw blades should try and place them far away from the raid so tanks can use them later. Paragons. Tanks. This fight can be incredibly complex and daunting at first, so just write this on a sticky note and keep it in view. Recall/Skier, Corvin, Zeril/Kilruck. If you're the Zeril and Recall tank, watch your DBM timers and use active mitigation for their special active mitigation abilities, especially on Recalls. For Corvin, taunt off after shield bash so the stun tank doesn't get nuked, and make sure no one else is in front of him as his vicious assault is actually a frontal cone. Later in the fight, if one of the Kunchongs matures, run over to it and tank it before it kills nearby squishies. Healers. Be prepared for raid members to take big spikes of damage when aim and fiery edge go off. Also, tanks often get spiked by Corvin's vicious assault, so be ready to heal through that as well. DPS. Focus Bloods, Amber, and Kunchongs as needed. Everyone. There are a lot of abilities here that require raid coordination. Isek's aim is a line that requires several people to run into it and split the damage, although it can be stopped if the target uses an ability like greater invisibility or feign death. Fiery Edge puts highly damaging lines between players. Don't move if it's on you, as you risk slicing the lines through another player and killing them. For Catalyst, red and yellow mean spread, while blue needs to split with people around you, similar to Inferno Strike and Protectors. Garrosh Hellscream. First, give yourself a pat on the back if you made it this far. On Flex, these last few bosses are all more difficult than the first few bosses are on Normal. The Garrosh encounter in particular is a long fight that requires a solid strategy, really tight execution, and good performance from all the people in your group. As such, I'll be breaking it down by phase instead of by role. Phase 1. This phase is more of a DPS and tank check than anything. If your tanks are squishy or don't know how to use defensive cooldowns, they will die here when taking Garrosh and 6 adds. If your DPS don't switch to desecrated weapons or don't AoE the adds quickly enough, things will get out of control and you will wipe. Transition. As long as your groups are split properly, you shouldn't have much trouble with these. Annihilate now deals over 1,000,000 damage on a direct hit, so don't stand in it. It also deals 250k raid-wide damage, so good healing throughput is required. Phase 2. The 3 abilities in this phase are really the meat of the entire fight, so it will take time to explain them in detail. Fortunately, they're always in the same order. Desecrate throws a weapon to a random range member, then about 5 seconds later, Touch Heavy Charge mind controls 2 random raid members, then about 15 seconds later, Whirling Corruption deals heavy raid-wide damage, more so in melee range. The next cycle begins about 15 seconds later with Desecrate. The fundamental strategy for dealing with this is, the ranged and healers run and stack about 30 yards away from the boss until the weapon is thrown. Immediately after, they run into melee so the mind-controlled people can be easily cleaved and interrupted. Immediately after the MCs are down, the tanks and melee move the boss 30 yards away to reduce the damage of Whirling Corruption. Now let's go over it again in real time. Desecrate gets thrown and the ranged run into melee. Touch Heavy Charge mind controls 2 people, and once they're broken, the tanks and melee move away from the ranged. Whirling Corruption finishes, starting the cycle again with Desecrate. Melee DPS who are not confident they can survive a whirl due to being squishy or having no personal cooldowns up can choose to stay out. Remember, you deal 0 damage when you're dead. Also, just before the second transition, the Desecrate will instead be immediately followed by a whirl, meaning the whole raid will take the full damage. Area raid cooldowns like Power Word Barrier, Spirit Link Totem, or Smoke Bomb are really useful here. After you come out from the second transition, Whirling Corruption will now become empowered, meaning it will now make pools under people's feet that explode and summon a little ad. When these ads die, they heal other ads near them to full and give them a stacking 200% damage buff. This basically means the ads need to be split and burned down as quickly as possible. Every raid member has a responsibility here to split up ads if 2 or more are clumped together, and everyone, including healers, should try and DPS them as much as possible. Tanks need to be very careful about AoE spells and healing aggro, as even 3 to 4 ads clumped on the tank can quickly become unmanageable once they start buffing each other's damage. Healers also need to be on the ball here, as not only will the raid be taking heavy damage from Whirling Corruption, but they will now be split up, possibly taking damage from puddles and ads, and you yourself will need to move, and possibly will have an ad attacking you. Additionally, remember that only 20 to 30 seconds after Empowered Whirling Corruption gets cast, there will be mind controls again. meaning ranged can't be out too far or they risk being out of range of interrupts. Empowered Dwelling Corruption is easily the most difficult part of the fight, and your group's ability to deal with it will likely make or break the raid. Finally, in Phase 3, there will be 2 additional empowered abilities to worry about. Empowered Mind Controls will be immune to crowd control and will need to be interrupted. If you're a class like Hunter or Mage with a good long-range interrupt, it's very important that you keep an eye out for any mind controls far away from the raid, as their casts are only 2 seconds long, and letting one go through can very quickly snowball into a wipe. Additionally, the tank debuff, Gripping Despair, will now explode for raid-wide damage each time it wears off. This will often happen during the Empowered Worlds, putting even more pressure on the healers. That's it for Flex 3 and 4. Hopefully this guide helps you out, and take pride in the fact that there's really very little separating a Flex 4 raider from a normal raider. Good luck, and I hope you get an awesome heirloom drop from Garrosh. If you like this guide, make sure to comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.